They called her the Eye of God. She watched everyone. She judged everyone. She reported everyone until the day her own daughter lay dying on a hospital bed, and the doctor who could save her life was the same young woman she had destroyed years before. This is the Watchful Eye. Before we continue, I would like you to go to the comment section and tell us if you have Mrs. Olivia in your church or your neighborhood. Also, don't hesitate to like, share and subscribe for more if you like our stories. Now, let's continue. Everyone in Hillside community knew Deaconess Olivia. She wore her faith like armor and her Bible like a sword. Every Sunday, she sat in the third row of Grace Covenant Church, her back straight as a ruler, her eyes scanning the congregation for any sign of waywardness. That woman sees sin where there is none, Sister Ruth once whispered to her friend after service. Hush, her friend replied. She means well, she just takes her calling seriously, perhaps too seriously. Deaconess Olivia believed God had given her a special assignment to guard the young people of the church from the corrupting influences of the world. She watched them like a hawk watches chickens. If a young man lingered too long talking to a young woman after service, she would clear her throat loudly until they separated. If she caught wind of a party, she would call the parents. If she saw a church youth at the cinema, she would schedule a prayer meeting to pray against the spirit of worldliness. The young people learned to be extra careful around her. They called her the eye behind her back, but they also respected her authority. After all, she was a deaconess and she had the pastor's ear. One Saturday afternoon, Deaconess Olivia was returning from the market when she saw something that made her blood boil. There, sitting on a bench under the mango tree near the church, was Margaret Okafor, a second-year undergraduate from the university, talking and laughing with a young man. They sat close, too close for Deaconess Olivia's liking. The young man said something and Margaret threw her head back and laughed. Abomination, Deaconess Olivia muttered under her breath. She marched straight to the pastor's house. Pastor, I need to report something urgent, she said, barely waiting for him to invite her in. Pastor Adeyemi was a gentleman in his 50s who preferred reconciliation to confrontation. He sighed inwardly as Deaconess Olivia settled into the chair across his desk. What is it, Deaconess? It's Margaret Okafor. I saw her with a young man today under the mango tree, laughing and carrying on. Pastor, we cannot allow this kind of behavior to flourish in our church. Today is public display. Tomorrow it will be something worse. We must act now. Pastor Adeyemi rubbed his temples. Deaconess, perhaps they were just talking. Margaret is a good girl. She sings in the choir. That's how it starts, Pastor. Deaconess Olivia interrupted. That's exactly how the enemy works. He makes sin look innocent until it's too late. We must call her parents. We must discipline her. I will talk to her, Pastor Adeyemi said calmly. But I don't think we need to make a big issue of it. Deaconess Olivia's eyes narrowed. She stood up abruptly. I see. Well, Pastor, I hope you won't regret turning a blind eye to sin. She left his office with a slam of the door. 2 weeks later, Pastor Adeyemi received a letter from the church headquarters. He was being transferred to a rural parish, effective immediately. The letter cited reports of laxity in maintaining church standards and discipline. Pastor Adeyemi knew exactly who had written to headquarters. The new pastor was stricter, more in line with Deaconess Olivia's thinking. She was pleased. Order had been restored. Meanwhile, Margaret had heard about the trouble she had caused. The young man she's been talking to was her cousin, visiting from another state. But no one had asked her to explain. She felt humiliated and angry, but she said nothing. She simply threw herself into her studies with renewed determination. She would become a doctor, she decided. She would help people who needed help, not judge them for things they didn't do. Years passed. Deaconess Olivia continued her watchful ways. Her daughter Ruth was the model of propriety. She never wore trousers, never wore makeup, never went anywhere without permission. She was quiet, obedient, and always present at every church activity. "See my Ruth," Deaconess Olivia would say proudly to other mothers. "This is how you raise godly daughter. You must be vigilant. You must watch them." What Deaconess Olivia didn't know was that Ruth had learned something from her mother's vigilance, how to hide things very well. Ruth had a boyfriend. They had been seeing each other for over a year. She told her mother she was going to Bible study, to choir practice, to evangelism programs, and she was lying every time. When Ruth discovered she was pregnant, she was terrified, not of having a child, but of her mother finding out. She could already hear the screaming, see the disappointment, feel the shame that would be heaped upon her. "I can't tell her," Ruth sobbed to her boyfriend. "She will kill me." "You don't know my mother." "Then what will you do?" he asked, frightened himself. "I know someone," Ruth whispered. "Someone who can help me take care of it." The someone was a man who operated from a small dingy room behind the motor park. He called himself a doctor, but he had no certificate, no license, no real training. Just some equipment he had bought and some procedures he had learned by watching. "It's simple," he assured Ruth. "You will be fine, in and out, like nothing happened." But everything went wrong. Ruth started bleeding heavily. The pain was unbearable. She passed out. The man panicked and had someone rushed her to the teaching hospital. Deaconess Olivia was in her shop when she received the phone call. "Madam, please come to teaching hospital. Your daughter is here. Emergency ward." The wall tilted. Deaconess Olivia ran. When she burst into the emergency ward, she saw Ruth on a stretcher, pale as death, blood-soaked clothes, barely conscious. Nurses rushed around her. Deaconess Olivia screamed, "My daughter! What happened to my daughter?" A nurse tried to calm her. "Madam, please, the doctor is attending to her. She lost a lot of blood." There were complications from an unsafe abortion procedures. The worst hit Deaconess Olivia like a physical blow. Abortion? Her Ruth? Impossible. But there was no time for questions. Ruth was dying. "We need to operate immediately," a voice said. Deaconess Olivia looked up and her world stopped spinning for a different reason. Standing there in a white coat, stethoscope around her neck, calm and professional, was Dr. Margaret Okafor. The same Margaret she had accused years ago. The same girl she had gotten a pastor transferred over. The same young woman whose reputation she had tried to damage. Margaret looked at her. Their eyes met. Recognition flashed between them. For a moment, everything was silent. Then Margaret spoke, her voice steady and kind. "Deaconess Olivia, your daughter is in critical condition, but we are going to do everything we can to save her. I need you to sign this consent form so we can take her to surgery right away." Deaconess Olivia's hand shook as she took the clipboard. She couldn't speak. Shame, fear and guilt crashed over her in waves. Will she live?" she finally managed to whisper. Margaret's expression softened. "I'll do my very best, I promise you that." As they wheeled Ruth away, Deaconess Olivia collapsed into a chair. She sat there for 5 hours while Margaret and her team worked to save Ruth's life. 5 hours to think about everything, about judgment, about mercy, about the fact that while she has been watching everyone else's children, her own daughter had been drowning in silence and fear. When Margaret finally emerged from the operating theater, still in her scrubs, Deaconess Olivia jumped to her feet. "She's stable," Margaret said quietly. "She's going to be okay. She will need time to recover, but she will be fine." Deaconess Olivia broke down and wept. "Thank you," she sobbed. "Thank you. I am so sorry. I am so sorry for what I did to you. I was wrong. I was so wrong about everything." Margaret was quiet for a moment. Then she pulled up a chair and sat beside the broken woman. "Deaconess," she said gently, "that young man you saw me with that day was my cousin. He was visiting from Jos, but nobody asked me. Nobody wanted to hear my side. You judged me without knowing the truth." "I know," Deaconess Olivia whispered. "God forgive me, I know. I was angry for a long time," Margaret continued. "But that anger pushed me to work harder, to become someone who helps people instead of judging them. So in a strange way, you helped me find my purpose." She paused, then added, "Your daughter needs you now. Not the watchful judging you. She needs a mother who will listen, who will love her without conditions, who will help her heal." Deaconess Olivia nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Can I see her?" she asked. "Soon. Let her rest a little more." As Margaret walked away, Deaconess Olivia called out to her, "Dr. Margaret!" Margaret turned. "Why did you save her? After everything I did to you?" Margaret smiled sadly. "Because I took an oath to heal, not to judge. That's God's job, not mine. And maybe not yours either." When Ruth woke up, the first face she saw was her mother's, but it was a different mother. Her eyes were red from crying, but they were soft, full of love, not anger. "Mama," Ruth whispered, fear in her voice. "Shh," Deaconess Olivia said, taking her daughter's hand. "Rest now. We will talk later. I am here. I am not going anywhere. And whatever comes, we will face it together." Ruth began to cry, and Deaconess Olivia held her. Really held her for the first time in years. In the days that followed, Deaconess Olivia had many conversations with her daughter. She learned about the boyfriend, about the fear, about the loneliness Ruth had felt despite being surrounded by church people. "I was so afraid of disappointing you," Ruth confessed. "You were always watching everyone, judging everyone. I couldn't disappoint you, so I hid everything." The words cut deep, but Deaconess Olivia knew they were true. She also had a long conversation with Pastor Adeyemi, who had been brought back to the church. She apologized for her actions years ago. She apologized to Margaret publicly in front of the entire congregation. "I thought I was doing God's work," she said, her voice breaking. "But I was really just being cruel and self-righteous. I hurt people. I hurt my own daughter by making her afraid to be honest with me. I am sorry." The church was silent. Then, one by one, people began to clap, not in mockery, but in appreciation of her honesty. Margaret was there that Sunday. She stood up and walked to the front. "I forgive you, Deaconess," she said simply. "And I hope you can all learn from this. Let's love more and judge less." Months later, when Ruth was fully recovered and getting counseling, Deaconess Olivia visited Dr. Margaret at the hospital. "I brought you something," she said, handing over a small package. Inside was a beautiful journal and a note that read, "Thank you for teaching me that God's work is not about watching for sin, but about offering grace. You saved my daughter's life, but you also saved mine." Margaret smiled and hugged her. "How is Ruth?" she asked. "Better. We are talking now, really talking. She's back in school. She's healing." "And you?" Deaconess Olivia thought for a moment. "I am learning to listen more than I speak, learning to love more than I judge, learning that God's eye sees everything so I don't have to." She paused, then added with a small smile, "They don't call me the eye anymore. Now they call me Mama Olivia. I like that much better." As she left the hospital that day, Deaconess Olivia walked with a lighter step. She had learned the hardest lesson of her life, but it had transformed her. She had learned that mercy triumphs over judgment, and that the most important thing the eyes of faith should look for is not the faults in others, but the opportunity to show love. 2 years later, a new program started at Grace Covenant Church. It was called Safe Space, a place where young people could come and talk about their struggles without fear of judgment. They could ask questions about relationships, about temptation, about the pressures they faced. The program was Deaconess Olivia's idea. She didn't run it alone. Dr. Margaret Okafor volunteered every other Saturday to talk to the young people about health, relationships, and making wise choices. Ruth, now graduated and worked as a teacher, helped facilitate the discussions. One Saturday, a young girl stood up nervously. "Deaconess Olivia," she said, "I made a mistake. I am scared to tell my parents. I don't know what to do." The old Deaconess Olivia would have gasped in horror and reached for her phone to call the girl's parents immediately. But Mama Olivia simply stood up, walked over to the girl, and held her hand. "Thank you for being brave enough to tell the truth," she said gently. "Now let's sit down and talk about how we can help you. You are not alone, and whatever happens, you are loved." The girl began to cry with relief, and Margaret watched from across the room. She caught Olivia's eyes and smiled. Olivia smiled back, tears glistening in her own eyes. She had finally learned what it truly meant to do the Lord's work, not with a watchful eye, but with open arms.